The story of 100 unforgettable goals does not begin in the grand stadiums of Madrid, Manchester, or Turin. It begins far away, in a small, wind-beaten island in the Atlantic. An island called Madeira. On that island, in the narrow streets where children played barefoot, there was a boy who seemed too thin, too fragile, too restless for the world he was born into. That boy's name was Cristiano Ronaldo dos Santos Aveiro. And though the world didn't know it yet, his life would be defined not by comfort, but by fight. Cristiano grew up with hunger in his stomach, sometimes real hunger, the kind where food was scarce, and sometimes the hunger of dreams too big to be swallowed by the walls of his family's modest home. His father worked at a local football club, often struggling with alcohol. His mother worked tirelessly as a cook and cleaner, doing whatever she could to keep the family afloat. And yet, amidst the struggles, the boy found an escape. A ball. Not always a real football, sometimes just a bundle of rags, sometimes a plastic bottle kicked until it burst apart. But for Cristiano, it wasn't just play. It was survival. He would spend hours chasing the ball down narrow alleyways, striking it against walls, pretending every kick was a goal that would change his fate. The other kids sometimes laughed. He was skinny. He cried often when he lost. But Cristiano had something they didn't, a fire inside that no one could put out. At night, when his mother thought he was asleep, he would whisper to himself, "One day, they will know my name. One day, I will be the best." But dreams have a way of colliding with reality. When he was 12, Cristiano made the bravest decision of his young life. He left home. He left his island. He left behind his mother's cooking, his father's familiar face, and the comfort of the sea breeze. He traveled alone to Lisbon, to join the sporting academy. 12 years old. Just a boy, but carrying a man's burden. There, in a city where he was just another name on a list of hopefuls, Cristiano found himself mocked for his accent, for his thin frame, for crying when he missed his family. He was lonely. He was desperate. More than once, he thought about quitting. But every night, he made himself a promise. He would not return home as a failure. It was during those lonely nights in Lisbon that his legend began to take shape. He trained harder than anyone else. He ran longer. He practiced free kicks until his legs ached, until the lights of the academy went out. Coaches noticed something strange about this boy. He wasn't the tallest, nor the strongest. But he had speed that looked unnatural. He had a hunger that scared them. And then came the goals. At Sporting, he began to score goals that didn't look like they belonged to a boy his age. Goals that carried a defiance inside them, as if every strike of the ball was a message to the world. I will not bow. I will not break. It was only a matter of time before someone noticed. And that someone was Sir Alex Ferguson. But before Manchester, before Madrid, before all the glory, Cristiano had to conquer the doubts inside his own head. He was still a boy who cried in the dark. Still a boy who felt too far from home. Still a boy haunted by his father's silence when alcohol stole him away. One night, after scoring a brilliant goal in a youth match, Cristiano sat alone in his room. No one came to congratulate him. No one hugged him. The cheers of the crowd faded quickly, and he was left staring at the ceiling, wondering if it was all worth it. But in that silence, he found his answer. The goals weren't just for the crowds. They weren't just for coaches, or clubs, or fame. They were for the boy inside him, the boy who had made a promise to himself. The boy who refused to bow. Years later, when the world saw Cristiano Ronaldo scoring overhead kicks in Champions League finals, or rising above defenders like a storm to head the ball into the net, few people remembered the boy from Madeira. Few people remembered the loneliness, the tears, the hunger. But every single one of those 100 legendary goals began here. In the story of a boy who learned to turn pain into power. And if you listen closely, when the crowd roars after one of his impossible strikes, you can almost hear the echo of his childhood whispers. One day, I will be the best. This was not just the birth of a footballer. This was the beginning of a legend. But what awaited him next was a test even greater. Because the moment Cristiano Ronaldo stepped onto the pitch for Manchester United, the world was ready to laugh at him. The tricks, the flicks, the showboating. Many believed he was all flash, no fire. They had no idea that the boy from Madeira was about to turn their doubt into fear. And his goals, would begin to write history. When Cristiano Ronaldo stepped off the plane and walked into Manchester United's dressing room, he was only 18. A teenager with gelled hair, sparkling boots, and a confidence that felt strange to the veterans who shared the locker room with him. This was Manchester United, the theatre of dreams, home of legends. And here stood a boy from an island most of them had barely heard of. Some players laughed at him. Others dismissed him. They said he was too skinny, too flashy, too obsessed with stepovers. A boy who danced with the ball but didn't know how to use it. But Sir Alex Ferguson saw something different. Where others saw arrogance, Ferguson saw determination. Where others saw unnecessary tricks, he saw fearlessness. He had brought Cristiano here not to blend in, but to set the stage on fire. Cristiano's debut came against Bolton Wanderers in August 2003. He didn't score. But Old Trafford had never seen anything like it. The stepovers, the acceleration, the raw courage to take on defenders again and again. For the first time, Manchester believed that maybe, just maybe, Ferguson had found the next great one. But the goals, the ones that would write his story, were not immediate. Critics lined up quickly. Showboater, they called him. Overhyped. They said he was more interested in tricks than in substance. And Cristiano listened. He heard every word. And inside, the boy who had once whispered to himself in the dark began whispering again. One day, I will prove them wrong. The proving began slowly. A free kick here. A darting run there. His first goal for United came against Portsmouth in the League Cup. A simple strike, but to Cristiano it was a signal. He had broken the barrier. Now, he was chasing the flood. It wasn't just the goals that made him dangerous, it was the way he scored them. He didn't creep into the box to finish off easy tap-ins. He ripped the ball from 30 yards. He bent free kicks that swerved like ghosts. He leapt above defenders with a hunger that seemed impossible for a boy so young. But with each goal came something else. The boos, the jeers, the defenders who doubled up, who kicked at him, who tried to break his spirit. Cristiano wasn't just fighting for goals. He was fighting for respect. And then came Arsenal. A team unbeaten. A team feared. A team that called themselves invincible. In October 2004, the streak came to Old Trafford. Arsenal arrived unbeaten in 49 league games. They expected to leave with 50. But Cristiano had other plans. That day, Manchester United broke Arsenal's streak. And Cristiano, barely 20, was the dagger that cut through their pride. His pace, his fearlessness, his ability to stretch even the toughest defense, it left Arsenal gasping. The boy from Madeira had just announced himself to the English game. And yet, the goals only grew more extraordinary. In 2006, against Fulham, Cristiano picked the ball up near the halfway line, danced past defenders like they were shadows, and struck with venom. It wasn't just a goal. It was a warning. Then, in 2007, came the free kicks. Not the gentle curlers of ordinary players. No, Cristiano invented something else. A ball struck with such violence and dip that keepers froze. The knuckleball. Against Portsmouth, against Bolton, against anyone brave enough to give him the space, the goals came like lightning. Every strike was a chapter in his rebellion against doubt. Every celebration was a message, I am not just here to play. I am here to reign. By the 2007 to 2008 season, Cristiano Ronaldo had transformed. No longer just a tricky winger, he became a goal machine. 42 goals in all competitions. A header against Chelsea in the Champions League final. A season that turned his name from promising talent to global superstar. But even as he soared, the weight grew heavier. The English press hunted for flaws. Rivals accused him of diving, of arrogance. Fans hurled abuse. Yet Cristiano thrived on it. The louder the boos, the more violent his goals. One of his most unforgettable strikes came against Porto in 2009. A Champions League quarter-final. 40 yards from goal. Cristiano picked up the ball, looked up, and struck. A thunderbolt. The ball didn't just fly, it tore through the night like destiny itself. The world stood in silence. And for the first time, even his harshest critics admitted, this boy was becoming something unstoppable. Still, Cristiano knew that Manchester was only the beginning. The boy from Madeira had dreamed not just of being great, but of being the greatest. And there was one place, one stage, that called to him louder than all the rest. Real Madrid. But before he could answer that call, before he could leave England, he had to etch his name into United's history one last time. Cristiano Ronaldo lifted his third Premier League title with Manchester United. He had given the club goals that defied logic. He had given them nights to remember. He had grown from a skinny boy mocked for his stepovers into a phenomenon who terrified defenders across Europe. And yet, for Cristiano, it wasn't enough. Because somewhere in Spain, another story was being written. A rival was rising. A player named Lionel Messi. And Ronaldo knew that if he wanted to be remembered not just as a star, but as a legend, he would have to face that rival on the grandest stage of them all. And so, the boy who refused to bow packed his dreams, his fire, and his hunger, and prepared for Madrid. The next chapter of his story would not just test his strength. It would test his soul. And it would give the world some of the most unforgettable goals in football history. When Cristiano Ronaldo signed for Real Madrid in the summer of 2009, the world gasped. £80 million, a record fee. The most expensive player on earth. As he stood before 80,000 fans at the Santiago Bernabéu, lifting the famous white shirt, chants thundered across the stadium. For most players, that moment would be the peak. For Cristiano, it was just the beginning. Madrid did not buy him to be good. They bought him to be a god. And gods are judged not by appearances, but by goals. Cristiano understood this better than anyone. From the first training session, he set the tone. Hours before teammates arrived, he was already on the pitch, striking balls, sprinting, sculpting himself into a weapon. He was obsessed, relentless, almost frightening in his dedication. And soon, the goals came. On his debut, against Deportivo La Coruña, he scored. The floodgates opened. Week after week, the net shook. Free kicks, volleys, headers, tap-ins turned into thunderbolts. Cristiano didn't just score, he devoured. But it wasn't enough to score. Not in Madrid. Not with Barcelona and Lionel Messi lurking in the shadows. Every goal Cristiano scored seemed to echo louder because of the rivalry across Spain. Every celebration was not just for Madrid, but a message to Barcelona: I am here. I am coming. Then came the Clásicos. The nights when Spain stopped breathing. The world tuned in not just for a game, but for a war. And in those battles, Cristiano's goals carved his legend. April 2011, Copa del Rey final. Valencia. The match was deadlocked. Tension suffocated the stadium. In the 103rd minute, Ángel Di María sent in a cross. Cristiano rose into the night sky, as if gravity had been suspended just for him. His header thundered into the net. Real Madrid were kings. Barcelona were silenced. And Cristiano, with one leap, had delivered his first major trophy in white. But that was only a taste. Over the next seasons, Cristiano's goals became relentless. 60 goals in a single season. Hat-tricks delivered like clockwork. Records once thought untouchable shattered one by one. There was the goal against Galatasaray in 2013, where he danced past defenders and smashed the ball with fury. The iconic header against Manchester United, returning to Old Trafford as a villain and a hero all at once. The bicycle kick against Juventus, a goal so perfect that even the opposition fans rose to applaud. That night in Turin, when Cristiano flew into the air and struck the ball backwards into the top corner, football itself seemed to pause. Commentators gasped. Defenders bowed their heads. For a brief moment, even those who hated him had no choice but to admire. It wasn't just a goal. It was art. And yet, for all the glory, there was always a shadow. Lionel Messi. Every week, Messi scored. Every week, Cristiano answered. It was more than a rivalry, it was destiny. Two players pushing each other beyond the limits of human performance. And at the center of it all, the goals. But perhaps the truest measure of Cristiano's greatness came not in La Liga, but in Europe. The Champions League. The competition where legends are born. Cristiano owned the Knights of Europe. Against Wolfsburg, when Madrid were 2-0 down in the quarter-final, the Bernabéu trembled with fear. But Cristiano stepped forward. He scored once, twice, then a free kick, bent through a wall like a dagger. A hat trick, a comeback, a night etched in Madrid's soul. Against Bayern Munich, he scored 5 over 2 legs, dismantling giants with clinical precision. Against Atletico Madrid, in the semi-final of 2017, another hat trick, delivered with ruthless certainty. And in the finals, the greatest stage, he never hid. 2014, Lisbon. Extra time. Real Madrid had fought back from despair. And Cristiano, in the dying moments, sealed La Decima with a goal and a roar that shook the heavens. 2017, Cardiff. He struck twice against Juventus, lifting his 3rd Champions League trophy with Madrid. 2018, Kiev. Though it was Bale's overhead kick that stole the headlines, Cristiano had already delivered along the road, ensuring Madrid lifted their 3rd consecutive crown. By then, he had become the all-time top scorer of the Champions League, a record many thought untouchable. But the numbers, as incredible as they were, never told the full story. It was the feeling, the inevitability. When Cristiano stepped onto a European night, fans, teammates, and even opponents felt it. The storm was coming. The goal was coming. And every strike carried the same fire that had burned since Madeira. The hunger. The obsession. The boy who once cried in the dark now stood before the world as its most feared marksman. But behind the roar of the crowds, behind the glint of trophies, there was always another weight. The critics never stopped. Some called him selfish. Some said he was obsessed with records, with numbers, with glory. Cristiano heard it all, and he turned it into fuel. Because to him, the goals were not vanity. They were proof. Proof that every sacrifice, every lonely night in Lisbon, every doubt faced in England, had been worth it. Still, Madrid was not forever. By 2018, after 9 years, 450 goals, and countless memories, Cristiano made the decision that shook football again. He left. The Bernabeu wept. Fans who once booed him now begged him to stay. The boy who had arrived to suspicion left as the club's greatest ever scorer. A man who had given Madrid not just goals, but immortality. Yet Cristiano's story was not finished. Not even close. Because now, the weight of a nation awaited him. Portugal. The country that had watched him grow, that had placed its hope on his shoulders. The country that demanded not just goals, but miracles. And Cristiano was ready to deliver them. Club glory is one thing. Wearing the white of Madrid, the red of Manchester, the black and white of Juventus, those goals brought Cristiano respect, fear, and history. But when he pulled on the deep red of Portugal, something heavier settled on his chest. This was not about contracts, not about money, not about rivals. This was about home, about the island where he was born, about the family that sacrificed everything, about the boy who once cried alone in Lisbon, dreaming of moments that would make his people proud. For Portugal, Cristiano Ronaldo was not just a footballer. He was hope, and hope is the heaviest weight of all. It began in 2004, the European Championship on home soil. Cristiano was just 19, a teenager, wide-eyed, still with that boyish face, but already a weapon. He scored against Greece in the group stage, his first tournament goal, celebrating with tears streaming down his face. It was innocence and fire mixed together. Portugal reached the final that year, the entire country believing this was destiny. But destiny can be cruel. Greece, the outsiders, stunned them. Portugal's dream was crushed. And in that moment, as the final whistle blew, cameras caught Cristiano crying uncontrollably, unable to hide his pain. It was the first time the world saw what the national team meant to him. It wasn't just football, it was life. From that day, Cristiano swore he would bring glory to his country. But glory would not come easily. Years passed. He scored goal after goal in qualifiers, carried Portugal into World Cups and Euros almost single-handedly. But in the biggest moments, heartbreak returned again and again. 2006 World Cup, semi-final defeat to France. 2008 Euros, quarter-final exit. 2010 World Cup, knocked out by Spain. Each time, Cristiano's face told the story. The frustration, the weight, the loneliness of being the one player the entire world expected to deliver miracles. But Cristiano never gave up. His goals kept coming. One night in particular, November 2013, became legend. Portugal were fighting for a place at the World Cup. Their opponent, Zlatan Ibrahimovic's Sweden. It was supposed to be Zlatan's night. He scored twice, dragging Sweden forward. But Cristiano refused. He scored once, then twice, then a third. A hat-trick in a World Cup playoff. Portugal were going to Brazil. Cristiano had carried them on his back. That night, he didn't just score goals. He defied the impossible. And the world began to whisper, maybe, just maybe, he could bring his country a trophy. Then came 2016, the European Championship in France. Portugal were not favorites. They stumbled through the group stage, drawing all 3 matches. Critics laughed, but Cristiano fought on. Against Hungary, he scored twice, including a magical backheel that seemed to come from another planet. Portugal scraped through, and step by step, match by match, they climbed. In the semi-final against Wales, Cristiano rose above the defense, hanging in the air longer than seemed humanly possible, and thundered a header into the net. He roared, pounding his chest. He had dragged Portugal into the final. The final. Paris. Against the hosts, France. 90,000 fans screaming against them. For Portugal, it was David versus Goliath. And then, disaster. Early in the match, Cristiano was fouled. He tried to play on, tears in his eyes, his knee failing. He collapsed on the grass, clutching his leg. He begged to continue, but he couldn't. The captain, the talisman, the dream of a nation, broken. They carried him off the field. On the bench, he cried like that 19-year-old boy again. But something remarkable happened. Cristiano refused to sit in silence. With his knee wrapped, unable to run, he stood at the sideline, shouting instructions, urging his teammates on like a coach possessed. His voice carried through the Stade de France. His fire became theirs. And then, in extra time, substitute Eder struck. The ball flew past Loris into the French net. Portugal led. The dream was alive. When the final whistle blew, Cristiano Ronaldo, the boy who had once cried in defeat in 2004, now cried in triumph. Portugal were champions of Europe. His tears were of joy, of release, of destiny fulfilled. He lifted the trophy high above his head, the weight of a nation transformed into pride. But Cristiano's story with Portugal didn't end there. In 2018, at the World Cup in Russia, he gave the world one of his most unforgettable performances. Portugal against Spain. 90 minutes of chaos. Goals flying in from both sides. And in the dying moments, Portugal trailed 3-2. A free kick, 30 yards out. The stadium hushed. Cristiano stood over the ball, sweat dripping, eyes locked. The whistle blew. He struck. The ball curled, impossibly, over the wall and into the top corner. The net rippled. The crowd exploded. A hat trick. Cristiano ran to the corner flag, arms wide, defiant once again. Portugal may not have won the tournament. But that night, Cristiano reminded the world, when the shirt of his nation was on his back, he was unbreakable. And even as the years passed, even as age whispered in his ear, he continued to deliver. In 2021, he broke the record for most international goals of all time. More than Ali Day. More than any man in history. Each goal another piece of proof that his fight for Portugal was endless. Every time he scored, he pointed to the sky. Every time he roared not just for himself, but for his people. Because Cristiano Ronaldo's goals for Portugal were never just goals. They were promises kept. To his mother, to his father, to Madeira, to every boy and girl who dreamed of more. Still, even after the European crown, even after the World Cup hat-trick, critics never stopped. They said he was finished. They said Portugal no longer needed him. They said the boy had finally grown old. Cristiano heard them all. And like always, he turned it into fire. Because his story was not over. And in the twilight of his career, he would seek to prove, once again, that legends never fade. Now, it was time for one last chapter. Juventus. Manchester United again. Al Nassr. The twilight years, when most players fade quietly into history. But Cristiano Ronaldo was never most players. And even as time tried to slow him down, his goals, unforgettable, impossible, continued to echo. By 2018, Cristiano Ronaldo had conquered Spain. He had lifted Champions Leagues, shattered records, silenced doubters, and left behind a legacy at Real Madrid that would never be erased. But legends are not satisfied with the past. They hunger for more. And so, Cristiano left the comfort of the Bernabeu for a new battlefield, Juventus. The world gasped. Why leave Madrid at his peak? Why risk failure in Italy? But Cristiano had never feared challenges. He had always chased the impossible. In Turin, he arrived with the same hunger as the boy from Madeira. And once again, he answered with goals. On his debut, the net refused him. Critics laughed. They said perhaps this time the magic was fading. But soon, the flood began. Against Sassuolo, his first 2 goals in Serie A. Against Empoli, a thunderbolt from distance. Against Sampdoria, a header that defied gravity. But one night defined his Juventus story. March 2019. Champions League. Atletico Madrid had beaten Juventus 2-0 in the first leg. Critics said it was over. Cristiano was finished. But under the lights of Turin, he reminded the world who he was. He rose once. Header. Goal. He rose again. Header. Goal. And then, a penalty. Goal. Ruthless. Goal. A hat-trick. A miracle. Juventus through. Cristiano roared into the night, pounding his chest. The boy from Madeira still lived in him, still fighting, still refusing to bow. Yet, for all his goals, Juventus could not give him another Champions League crown. And soon, whispers began again. His time is done. He's too old. But Cristiano was not finished. In 2021, he returned to Manchester United. Old Trafford trembled with anticipation. The prodigal son was back. His first match. 2 goals. The stadium erupted. Time had passed, but the roar was the same. Cristiano still delivered. There was the last-minute winner against Villarreal in the Champions League. The hat-trick against Tottenham, lifting United on his shoulders once more. Even at 37, he scored like a man possessed. But football, like life, is cruel. United struggled. Critics sharpened their knives again. He is the problem, they said. He cannot adapt. For perhaps the first time, the boy who had silenced the world now found himself unwanted. And yet, even in those darkest whispers, the goals kept coming. Because for Cristiano Ronaldo, goals were not numbers. They were his language, his truth, his defiance. Then came Al Nassr, Saudi Arabia. A new stage, a new chapter. Many called it the end, a retirement home. But Cristiano refused to see it that way. From his first strike, a thunderous left-footed shot, to his hat-tricks, he proved again, wherever there is a goal, there will be Ronaldo. Because his story was never about leagues, never about clubs, never about borders. It was about the fight, the hunger, the refusal to fade. And so, the 100 goals we celebrate today are more than memories. They are milestones of a life lived against the odds. The bicycle kick against Juventus, defying physics. The header against Chelsea, soaring above giants. The free kick against Spain, bending destiny itself. The countless tap-ins, the ruthless penalties, the impossible strikes from distance. Each goal carrying the same message, I am still here. Cristiano Ronaldo's career has always been told in numbers. 5 Ballon d'Ors, over 800 goals, dozens of trophies. But numbers cannot capture what his goals truly meant. Every strike was a story. Every celebration was a roar against doubt. Every goal was a message to the boy he once was, the boy who cried in Madeira, the boy who left home at 12, the boy who promised himself he would be the best. And now, as we look back at his 100 legendary goals, impossible to forget, we understand something deeper. Cristiano Ronaldo is not just a footballer. He is not just a record breaker. He is proof. Proof that hunger can conquer talent. Proof that sacrifice can conquer doubt. Proof that dreams, no matter how impossible, can be scored into reality. Because in the end, these goals are not just memories of football. They are monuments, etched into time, etched into history, etched into us. And when the boots are hung, when the stadiums go silent, when the cheers fade into whispers, one truth will remain. Cristiano Ronaldo's goals will never be forgotten, because immortality has already been written.